Many define spiritual realization as accumulating peaceful states. However, genuine equanimity requires the deliberate fracturing of perception until it collapses into a void. Modern wellness culture frequently frames meditation as a psychological tool for stress reduction. This model treats contemplative practice as a linear method for stabilizing the current experience of the world. Advanced insight practices, both historically and in clinical settings, aim to achieve the opposite. Their goal is to dismantle the practitioner's reliance on reality by exposing its fundamental lack of solidity. The Buddhist concept of emptiness, or shunyata, is the technical term for this collapse. It is a phenomenological event where the mind ceases to project inherent existence onto its surroundings. Accessing this state requires an epistemological crisis. Consciousness must be forced to sever its connections to every sensory and mental object it uses to define its own existence. Before awareness can rest in the unconditioned, it must undergo a systemic destruction of the constructs it identifies as the self. This destruction targets specific layers of fabricated reality, known in integral theory as holons. By default, human consciousness identifies with these layers to create a sense of coherent identity. The gross holons comprise the physical, sensory-motor reality of waking life, the dense matter and basic biological drives. The subtle holons represent the mental, emotional, and energetic realities of thought and dreaming, the fluid images and internal visions of the individual's interior life. The combination of these two bodies creates the phenomenal matrix of human experience. Every sensation, memory, and reaction is housed within this dual structure. We habitually project svabhava, the illusion of independent, solid existence, onto these constructs. We treat our thoughts and physical sensations as if they were permanent entities rather than temporary processes. Spiritual practice is the targeted hacking of this matrix. It is a method for dismantling the gross and subtle layers to reveal the absence of a core identity underneath. The deconstruction begins when contemplative concentration reaches a threshold where the mind can no longer maintain the illusion of continuity. As the practitioner tracks the micro-sensations of phenomena, the brain's ability to stitch these moments into a solid object fails. The tradition calls this transition bhangajnana, the knowledge of disillusion. At this stage, the perception of things arising vanishes. Awareness locks on to the moment phenomena pass away, seeing only the trailing edge. The gross and subtle bodies lose their structural solidity. Physical form and thought dissolve into a relentless flux of disappearance. Without solid objects to anchor to, the structural integrity of the self begins to fail. The mind searches for a center and finds only a cascade of fading data points. This dissolution is the successful stripping away of svabhava. It is the first mechanical proof that the matrix is an assembly of fleeting parts. When the structure of reality fails to provide a stable ground, consciousness reacts with profound panic. This triggers bhayajnana, the knowledge of fearful things. Observing this total passing away causes the world to be perceived as inherently volatile. Every sensation becomes a signal of systemic instability. As the Abhidhamma describes, the phenomenal world appears as a pit of burning embers, a lethal trap. This fear transitions directly into the next clinical stage, adinavajnana, the knowledge of wretchedness. Wretchedness is the realization that no safe harbor exists within the gross or subtle realms. Every possible object of refuge is already in a state of terminal collapse. This terror is a necessary prerequisite for progress. Until the mind sees the inherent danger of the matrix, it lacks the motivation to release its grip on the constructs. The realization of wretchedness leads the mind to reject the phenomenal world entirely. This is nibbida jnana, the stage of profound disenchantment. Nibbida is distinct from psychological anger or clinical depression. It is an objective shift in how the mind evaluates reality. This stage is an evolutionary revulsion toward the fabricated matrix. The practitioner views the constant arising and passing of sensations as an exhausting and empty process. This revulsion provides the energetic force required to sever attachment to the gross and subtle bodies. It creates a psychological distance that the previous stages of fear could not achieve. This distance generates munchitu kamyata jnana, the driving desire for deliverance. A vector of escape forms as the mind actively seeks to move beyond the collapsing field. Existential disgust generates the force required to break the continuous orbit of becoming, providing momentum to exit the cycle of fleeting phenomena. When the mind ceases to interact with the gross and subtle constructs, the friction of the escape process subsides. Once consciousness stops finding a home within the flickering particles, it enters a state of suspension. This is the culmination of the deconstruction, sankharupekkha jnana, equanimity toward formations. This equanimity is a state of non-interference. The practitioner is no longer trying to stabilize or escape the world. They have simply stopped participating in it. The chaotic passing away of reality continues, but the practitioner observes it without alarm. They have ceased identifying their self with the phenomena in the matrix. Peace is achieved through structural independence from the gross and subtle worlds. By refusing to anchor itself to any part of the collapse, awareness remains completely unaffected by it, floating free. This process reveals the core logic of integral theory and its relationship to spiritual liberation. This sequence of deconstruction is the prerequisite for realizing the unconditioned, causal ground of reality. One must systematically dismantle the fabricated bodies to reveal the source that precedes them. Emptiness is achieved by systematically surviving the destruction of the illusion. It is the realization that remains when the phenomenal matrix is no longer mistaken for the self.